Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial. In this one, we're going to be building this amazing hover animation effects on these buttons. And all of these three are actually unique. And what you're going to realize is once you do one of these, it's going to get really easy to do any other animation that you like. In fact, apart from these, you can do much more after you learn the trick to do it. Alright, so let's get started. Let me create a basic template for my HTML, and in here I'm going to basically create a button with a class of, let's say, button, and let me say hover me, right? And also I'm gonna, since we need three different buttons, let me actually also give it a class of button one. So this is going to be our first button, and let me actually just copy this and create three buttons. So I'm going to hit save, and for the second button, let me say button 2, and the third button is basically button 3. So we have all the three buttons, and this is it for the HTML part. Let's actually go and start styling this. I forgot to actually link our CSS file, so I'm going to say link, and let me give the name of the file, which is button hover CSS, and that's it. We can start with our CSS. So to my body, what I'm going to do is give it display flex, right, and justify content center, and also align item center. So I'm basically trying to center all the content, that is both horizontally and vertically, and right now it's not taking the full width, so I'm going to say height 100 view height. So now this is going to be centered both horizontally and vertically. Cool. And also I want these buttons to be stacked on top of each other, so I'm going to say flex direction. I'm going to set the flex direction to column, right? So let me hit save, and yes, there we have it. And now let's start styling our button. So to my button class, first of all, let me give it padding of 10 pixel, and let me also give it margin of 10 pixels so that I can create some space. And let me hit save, and yes, we've created some space here, and we don't actually need a background, so I'm going to say background none, and instead of background I'm going to have border. I'm just going to have border actually, so 1 pixel solid. And actually I have a color right here which looks really pretty, so I'm going to use 7864 f4. Okay, and let me hit save. So this is basically our border, right? And we also want the text color to be the same, so I'm going to say color, and let me actually just copy this, and let me set the color to the same thing, right? We have this, and let's also give a font weight of bold, right? So let me say bold, and now yeah, so we have a button here and it already looks nice. Let me also give a border radius to our button, so I'm going to say border radius of say 10 pixel. Yeah, so we have our basic setup already, and let's actually go ahead and add some cool animation. And now the main trick is basically this. To your main button, right, you want to give a position of relative, and I'll tell you why we are doing that in a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pseudo element before, right? So let me say before. Now what does this before actually do? Now before and after, right, these pseudo elements are actually used for you to create insert content before or after. So when I say before, you're trying to insert content before or after. And also it never works if you don't give it the content property. So content, we don't actually want to insert anything, any text, right? So I'm going to give it empty. What this is going to do is it's still going to create another tag for us, or another element for us, without actually creating any markup. So what I mean by that, let me show it to you. So I'm going to say position of actually absolute this time, and the reason why I'm giving it position absolute is because I've given relative to its parent, and so that we can have it right on top of the button. Okay, so we have position absolute, and I'm going to give it a background. I'm going to use linear gradient here, and oops, yeah, linear gradient, and I'm going to basically paste these two colors that I have. Right now it's not visible because I need to position it, so from top it's 0, and also from left it's 0, right? So by saying this, what it means is it starts from this particular corner, right? Top left, it has to be 0, so the element should basically start from this corner. All right, and also for it to be visible, let's give it some width. Let's say 100% and also height of 100%. Right, let me hit save. And yeah, you can see, right, you have not even created any markup, but basically this is right here, right on top of the button. And this is the main trick for you to create any animation, right? So you can use these extra elements that we've created here to actually create an animation. So the next thing is the text is getting hidden behind this. So to this, we can give it a z index of -1 so that the text comes on top. And yeah, the text is actually coming on top. We can't see it right now because of, the colors are actually sort of very similar. And now we can move to creating our first animation for the first button. So the first thing, when we hover on the button, right, we want the text color to be white. So I'm going to say color to white and let me hit save. So when I try to hover on it, yes, the text is becoming white, and this has to be done for all the buttons. Alright, so now let's give any specific style that we want for the first button. So that's actually button 1, that's the class that we gave it, right? And to that we want to give styling for the before pseudo element, right? Because that's the one that we want to actually animate. So the first thing we want to do is let's actually give it a border radius of 0, 0, 50% and 50%. We only want to add it at the bottom, that is 50% this side and 50% this side, right? And before we hover, we don't actually want to see this at all. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to set the height to 0. So we can't see it right now, but when we hover on it, we want the height to actually increase, right? So for that, I can basically say my button 1, the before element, when I hover on it, I want to increase the height. So I'm going to say I want to increase the height to 100%. And let's check. Okay, it's actually not working because we have kind of actually reversed the order. So we should have this hover before. Yep, now this should basically work. Let's check that. Yes, it's working. First thing is let's actually add a smooth transition to it. So to my before element right here, I can say that I want to add transition, right? So transition, and we can transition all, that is, in this case it's going to transition anything that we give in case of our hover. So basically it's going to transition the height, so all, and let's say we want to do it for 0.5 seconds, and let me hit save. And now let's try. Yeah, it's pretty smooth, right? But there are a few things that we need to fix. The first one is it's not covering the entire button. So instead of a height of 100%, let's actually give it a height of 200% and try. Now let's check. Yeah, it's working, but the current content is actually overflowing right from the button. So this can be easily fixed. We can basically go to our button and say that we don't want any overflow. So I'm going to say overflow hidden. And now let's try. And yes, that's it. It's already working. We already have our first button ready. And now let's move on to our second animation. Now what we want to say is to our second button, right? The before pseudo element. So the thing we want to do is let's actually check the second button. So if you see, the pseudo element actually comes from 90 degrees to 0 degrees, right? You can see that. So that's the same thing we'll try to do here. We can say that we want to transform, right? We want to transform this element and say that we want to rotate this by an angle of 90 degrees, right? So I'm going to say -90 actually because it's in anti-clockwise direction. And right now you can see this, right? So this pseudo element is rotated by -90. But the thing is, it has to start at this particular point of this button, right? It's starting in the middle. So we want to say that the transform origin for this particular button should actually be bottom left, right? And this should actually fix things for us. And yes, now it has position right here, and all we have to do is when we hover on this button, so I'm going to say button 2, right? And when we hover on this button to the before element right here, I'm going to say that the thing that I need to do is rotate it back. So I'm going to say transform and rotate this back to 0. That's the normal state, right? So this is basically 0. So I'm going to go here and check, and yeah, it's rotating back to 0 degrees, right, when we hover on this. And now we can actually go and remove our overflow hidden. I mean to say we can uncomment this part and hit save, and let's check that. And yes, it's working beautifully, right? We have two buttons working already. And now let's do the third one. The third one is relatively simpler. We basically have the animation coming from top to bottom, and there is no angle or anything associated with this one. So all we have to do for the third button is very simple. Let's go to our third button, and let's say that to again the before element, I'm going to say let's keep a height of 0, right? That is, nothing is going to be visible. And when I hover on this, so I'm going to say button 3. When I hover on it to my before element, we just want to increase the height, right? And we want to increase the height to the entire height, so just 100% would do. And let me hit save, and now let's try. And yes, it's working. We have all the three buttons working. The same thing we can also try to do it from left to right, right to left, and so on. So this is something that you could probably try after learning this tutorial. This is pretty much it for this video, guys. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and we're going to be doing more such cool animations. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well.